On April 23rd, 2005, the very first YouTube video came out, called Me at the Zoo. It was featuring its co-founder Jawed Karim at the San Diego Zoo. Since then, YouTube has gained over 2 billion users, and every day 1 billion hours of video are watched on the streaming platform. Now, as I'm sure a lot of you know, YouTube is the largest video sharing platform in the world, and it's owned by Google. By the way, Google actually purchased it for a whopping $1.65 billion only 1 year after its official release. Now, I think that by now it's pretty clear that YouTube's success is just massive, but I want to see how YouTube changed the music industry. So join us on this episode of UV's Music Podcast to find out. Let's do it. UV's Music Podcast, yeah! Hi guys, I'm UV, the host of today's podcast. And I gotta say, we have a very special episode planned. We'll have a guest speaker on later in the episode. And I was hoping we could jump right into it. The topic of today's episode is how has YouTube changed the music industry? You know, originally I was gonna do how has the internet changed the music industry. But then I very quickly realized that there's just way too much to get into. So I started at the very best spot in the internet to start. YouTube. So I'm just going to hop right into it, and then at the end of the episode, we'll go into an amazing interview with a secret special guest. Okay, so on July 5th, 2012, a South Korean singer released a video that took the internet by a toll. He released a song of his with a music video that he called Gangnam Style. This singer that goes by the name Psy very quickly started to gain traction. By December of that same year, the video became the first YouTube video to reach 1 billion views. In fact, Gangnam Style was so popular that it broke YouTube's view counter, which had to be upgraded immediately. Today, the video stands at a whopping 3.9 billion views. This song would never have reached an audience, or at least an audience of this size, if it wasn't for YouTube. And in case you guys were wondering, he now has a net worth of $60 million. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound too shabby for a catchy dance and song that somebody just posted on YouTube. Now, as you can imagine, Psy wasn't the only person to catch fame from this legendary platform. Justin Bieber, Shawn Mendes, Charlie Puth, and Alicia Cara were all discovered on YouTube. Okay, so by now I really hope that you see how vastly YouTube has affected the music industry. But what makes YouTube so different? You know what it is? It's the fact that it's a video sharing platform. Yes, Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook and all those others can share videos, but none of them are strictly video platforms. And in the music world, a music video can have a huge impact on the success of a song. Just like Gangnam Style story. But before there was YouTube, there was a little something called MTV. For those of you who might be living under a rock and not know what MTV is, it's a TV channel that was the place to go for music videos. At its height, it was releasing around 8 hours of music videos every day, constantly streaming. But around the early 2000s, MTV stopped showing as many YouTube videos as they used to and lost a lot of its viewers. They were only showing about 3 hours. And in 2008, Vevo started putting up music videos on YouTube for high-profile musicians, and today has almost 20 million subscribers. Now, Vevo it does have a YouTube channel, but really they film music videos for those high-profile celebrities. And if you actually look at the top 10 most watched videos on YouTube ever, 50% of those videos were filmed by Vevo. In fact, Despacito was the first video to reach 3 billion, first video to reach 4 billion, 5 billion, 6 billion, and 7 billion views. Right now, it's in the number 2 spot behind an amazing song written by amazing, talented musicians, Baby Shark. Quickly moving on. Seriously. I highly doubt that a song like Baby Shark would have reached the giant, crazy audience that I did if it wasn't for YouTube. And as you can imagine, Baby Shark isn't the only I don't know if you can call it a song, isn't the only song that reached a huge general public because of YouTube. Okay, so now that you have a little bit of basic information about YouTube, I want to give you information that I don't have. I want to know why musicians are switching over to YouTube, how YouTube treats them. Why would somebody want to go from being a professional recording musician to being a YouTuber? I have so many questions that I just don't have the answer to, so I decided that I need to speak somebody. And that's where the second half of this episode comes in. I reached out to a YouTuber by the name of Steven Taylor. He is an amazing guy. He's so friendly. He's incredible. And he immediately responded, which was nuts and super exciting. And I'm so thrilled that you guys are going to get to hear an interview that I did with him. Just so you know, this interview had to be cut into 2 parts because it was around 45 minutes long. So at some point, the interview will cut off, and you will just have to listen to the next episode. They'll come out at the same time. So I really hope you guys enjoy. I won't take up any more time. Let's do it.
Now we have a very special guest on the show today. He's a former Universal Studios recording artist. He was featured in the October 2013 issue of Drum Magazine. He's endorsed by some of the biggest drum companies in the world. He has his own YouTube channel with almost 300,000 subscribers, and he has his very own online drum school at stevensdrumshed.com. Please welcome my very first special guest on the show, Steven Taylor.
What is up, man? I'm going to have to try to live up to that intro.
I know, right? You got a lot of credentials going there.
It's a pretty daunting intro here. I don't know if we can live up to it.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. This is super exciting, our first guest. I was hoping we could jump right into it.
You bet. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to talk whatever you want to.
Awesome, that's great. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about your YouTube journey and how YouTube impacted your career as a professional musician.
Yeah. I don't want to get too long-winded, but that's kind of a big question because it's not just the YouTube, my YouTube journey, but it's really kind of technology and how that's affected the field of music just in general. So when I was coming up, reading Modern Drummer magazine and all those, it was pretty cut and dried as to what you could do. You could go into teaching, which meant you were going to be in a band type of a setting. As far as like a school band, you were going to be in a university type of setting, so you'd need to go get a doctorate to do that. Or you could be a touring musician, or you could be a session musician, and you could spend your time going to sessions at recording studios. A lot of changes with technology. Now it's very common to have a very high-end recording studio in a house because the cost of gear has come down so much. Whereas whenever I was coming up, that wasn't the case. Like, that was being a session musician was something you could aspire to. It was an actual job, like being a chef or being a whatever other thing, an engineer or something. Like, it was an actual career. And now it's been pieced off so much that, you talk to session players now and they'll tell you, I don't know that I would be doing what I'm doing because of how things have changed so much. And so by the time I graduated, because I went to college for a year and a half, and then I got my first full-time gig on Bourbon Street in New Orleans at the Famous Door. That's on the corner of Conti and Bourbon. And it's a really, really old club there. And we were in a dance band, and I did that for 2.5, 3 years. I played up and down what they call the street there, so Bourbon Street, as house drummer for different clubs. Later I was at a place called BBC, which is Bourbon Street Blues Company, a couple blocks down the road on Bourbon Street. And so I really cut my teeth there. I had been gigging starting at age 15. I started getting paid for gigs and doing that professionally. And then that was my first full-time, and that really taught me a ton. And but I felt like I'd learned everything I could, so I came back to college and finished up my college degree. And that took another 3.5 years, I think, 3 or 3.5 years, something like that. And then I moved here to Nashville, and by that point was I 25? I think I was 25 at that point. And so that's right around the time when YouTube was just kind of starting to come around. The internet, it was like it was really starting to be kind of a force to be reckoned with, because you had sites like YouTube coming up that were like giving a lot of power to creators, and that wasn't the case before. So I moved to Nashville and started doing what I had, you know, dreamed of doing and looked to do my entire life, and that was getting into the music industry and touring and session work. And I started doing all of that. I was doing some session work, I was doing demo sessions, and I was doing some road work, and I, you know, got out with a couple of major label artists as a sub drummer, and like I was doing that thing. And a lot of the guys that I moved to town with are now out with some really large artists. And I think if I would have stayed with that, I could have continued doing that, but I kind of had to step back, because you had road guys that were, you know, what you call road dogs, that had been on the road their whole life, and they were talking about how they wanted to come home, because, you know, so many of them didn't have families, because they had become, you know, it's hard to have a family when you're out 250 days a year on the road. You know, they didn't have financial stability, because at any point, if they weren't on a salaried position, which those nowadays are really few and far between with artists, then they had to pick up work whenever they weren't out with that artist. So, and then you had studio session musicians who the session world was changing, and they're now talking about they wanted to go on the road. And I'm like, I'm kind of new in town and I'm playing, and I was like, I don't know, this doesn't seem like what I thought it was, you know? And so after a year or so of that, I came home after one particularly bad gig. It was just awful. And I was tired, man. And I came home and I just talked to my wife, and I said, you know what, I think I need to get like a 9-to-5 with benefits and just like relax for a while. And of course she's like, are you feeling okay? And I said, yeah, I'm tired, and I'm too young to be tired, you know, because I was burning the candle at both ends. I was working part-time jobs as well. When I first moved here, I was working at UPS. I worked at a sandwich shop. I worked at another sandwich shop delivering food, because I had a family. And so, and the work, it was either really great or there wasn't much of it. So I just told her, I said, things got to be more stable for me to make a career out of this. And I think all too often people, they you know, there's the new movie that's out, actually, that's really great. I think everybody should watch it, especially if you're a musician or a creative. It's called Soul, and it's actually a Pixar movie. And it's about that struggle of having this one thing that you just really love, but you become so focused on that and on this, you know, ambiguous term of making it, that you wind up becoming obsessed with it, and everything else falls to the wayside, and life just becomes like this dull everyday thing. And then when you finally do get like that big break or that big gig or something, you sit back and you're like, well, I kind of thought it would be different than this. I thought my whole life would change, and really it's like you go home to the same house, the same person, you know, like not much changed. And so I just kind of started trying to look at my life as having several pillars that I could look at. And this does tie into your question, by the way. Having several pillars that I can look at, not only like professional, my music career, but also, you know, monetary. Like, how am I doing on that side? And do I have enough to be comfortable if I ever want to retire? Do I have enough to send kids to college? How am I doing relationship wise? You know, is my relationship with my wife good? If it's not, then if I've succeeded in one pillar, but the other pillars are crumbling and falling apart, then to me, it's not a very well-rounded life. And then you've got the faith pillar. And so you've got these different pillars that I would look to. And I just started to reevaluate things. So I wound up quitting music altogether. I got my personal trainer's license, what was supposed to take 5 or 6 months to get certified for. I'd already had an interest in fitness. I studied, and I think in 5 weeks, I had ordered the material, studied it, and passed the test. And so I was just like hardcore kind of turning the ship. And Kelly, that's my wife, she asked me, she said, well, are you going to get back into music? And I said, you know what, maybe. I said, there's this YouTube thing that was, I mean, I think Mike Johnson had maybe posted 1 or 2 of videos of like random drum lessons. This was before anyone had monetized anything. And YouTube was so new, I guess 2007, 2008. And I said, I don't know, maybe I'll start a blog, which I did. I ran a blog for about 3 years. And I said, but there's this YouTube thing. I don't know, maybe somebody would want lessons online. I don't know. I had just bought my first computer. Like I've been on my own for a long time. I've been working full time since I was 16. So I've been I moved down to my house like the week I graduated high school. I've been on my own, all this whole time. So, um, I had just bought my first computer. Like I was truly like that poor, that poor college guy, and so I was just happy to have a computer to work from. And so that was kind of where that started. And I made the goal as I watched things of, hey, I'm going to maybe teach some lessons on YouTube. And so, but before I could do that, I had to pay for, we had just had a newborn that we didn't have insurance. And so I had to pay a lot of money for that. And then we had to buy a house, and then I had to redo the house, and then I had to redo a space for my studio. So it was like a long trot before I could get there. And in the meantime, as you mentioned, I got in a band and we got signed to Universal Records. So I was doing that on the weekends for, quote unquote fun. And it was a blast. I had a blast. I'm still best friends with the guitarists from that group and love the other two guys. We just kind of live across town from each other, so we don't see each other much. But what happened was we got signed by Universal for a 2-song deal. There was some money involved. We did record the 2 songs, but then there was a vote within the band to fire or not fire our manager, who was the one that had gotten us signed. And myself and another member did not want to fire him. The other 2 did, and since we were 4 members, the founding member had majority in a tie. So we wound up firing our manager, and like a month after that, 2 months after that, the label dropped us because he was our connection to the label. And so I found myself like 29 in a band. We had a van. We just got dropped from our label, and I felt really close to becoming like a cliche, really close to being like, that musician with 2 kids, and I got a van, and my band goes out on the weekends, and we're really gonna do it. And I just kind of was like, I got to have something a little bit more stable than that. And the music had started to change in the band, by the way. I just didn't like the new stuff that was coming out. So I took a buyout from the band, and it wasn't much. It was just enough to buy my first camera and a laptop. And I had been posting some on YouTube. I had gotten one of those old flip cameras whenever they came out, and that's what my YouTube channel was run off of first. And then after a year and a half of doing YouTube, I started a website, my online drum school, and have just built it from there. So that's kind of my entry to YouTube. It was more of a thing of like, let me just play with this thing and see what can come of it. And you can look at my first videos there. I leave them all up just because.
I was just looking at it the other day.
Yeah, I don't mind people seeing my growth. Some people pull them down. I think it's healthy for people to be able to go back to, their favorite creators' oldest videos and be like, oh wow, these suck. When they started, I'm actually way farther ahead than they were when they started. So and when I started, I was in my garage. We had a little 1,500 square foot, 1,200 square foot house, and about a 300 square foot garage. So what I did was I pulled all of the garage door rigging down inside, and the garage door, I bolted it to the wall. So on the outside, it looked like there was a garage, but on the inside, we studded the wall, and then we put drywall. So that was my first, studio.
Yeah.
It had no AC, no heat. So in the summer, I was stopping in between takes to towel off or change shirts because I was sweating so much. And in the winter, I was using like work lights from Lowe's that get super hot. And so they're also super yellow and not great for camera, but I didn't know anything about that. And so I would turn those on to warm it up in the winter until finally it got so unbearable that I had I'm from Mississippi, so, we I don't mind being a little bit redneck every now and then. So I had an old, like what they call a window air conditioning unit that you can stick in the window. And I had the door in the back of my garage had a window in it. So I tore out the window of that door and I put the AC unit in the door. So whenever you would open the door, the AC unit like actually came out with the door. It was the most ghetto setup ever. But you know, it gave me a little AC in the summer because it gets super hot here. So that's kind of how I started with it, and then just grew it from there.
Right.
And have tried to get better at creating content over the last, gosh, I've been doing this 11 years now on YouTube, I guess. 10, 11 years.
Yeah, no, because you were such an early adapter to YouTube, right? You were one of the first people to really do the whole drum thing. So I was wondering, like, how long did it take? How many years or months did it take until it really started to take off? And you're like, okay, I'm building something here.
That's a good question. Much longer than it should have. Because it took me so long to start paying attention to some of the things that can really make your channel grow. And those are the kind of the nerdy side of things that musicians don't like to pay attention to. So the analytics on YouTube are so in-depth and so great. You can create this fantastic video, and you can screw up the first 20 seconds and have a bad thumbnail, and no one will see that video. You can make a great video with a great intro and have a bad thumbnail and a bad title, and no one will see that video. Because it's not just about, you know, what I didn't understand, and I've learned in the past couple of years, is your content is not just the video. Your content is the video, it's the thumbnail, it's the title, and it's the video description. All of those make up your content. You know, it's not just the video, because if you don't have a thumbnail that is clickable, no one's going to click on it to see your awesome video. If you don't have a title that gets someone's attention, no one's going to pay attention to that video. And so I have videos that I've watched after years of them being online where I actually got mad in the middle of the video because I was like, if they would have titled this better, I would have known this awesome information way earlier. But because they were so bad at titling this video, it took me years to even find it. And so when I started paying attention to analytics, paying attention to which videos did really well, which ones didn't do really well, watching other channels and understanding what they were doing, paying attention to thumbnails, paying attention to my titles, that's when things really started kind of beginning to take off. Just changing my thumbnail game was a big part of that. And then realizing, you know, all too often we come to it and we think of ourselves as, you know, drummers on YouTube instead of thinking of ourselves as creatives on YouTube. And really you have to start thinking like a creator instead of just a drum teacher or a whatever, a chef or whatever you are. You have to start thinking of yourself as a creative. How can I make engaging content that people want to watch? Not just, you know, how can I make, you can only teach the paradiddle so many ways. Like that really has been taught to death. So it's all in the presentation of that. Can I make that an engaging presentation? Can I show it in a new light? Can I show it in a new way? And a really good TV channel that has done this is the History Channel. So if you watch the History Channel from, I don't know, 6 or 7 years back, it's the most boring channel in the world. I mean, if you were into history, it was super interesting, but it was essentially just a bunch of guys talking over old footage, and it's just really boring. Whereas now, if you look at the History Channel, they've curated a lot of cool shows that are historically accurate, but they're very engaging. They're like series. They've, you know, like I was watching one while I was in the gym the other day, and it was like the top 10 Viking warships. You know, that title alone, I was like, absolutely, I want to know what the top 10 Viking warships are. Like, you know what? Yeah. Exactly. Why would I not want to know that? So that's an example of a TV channel now not just viewing itself as, okay, we're a history channel. What they viewed themselves as is we're an entertainment channel that's topic is history. So how can we entertain these people, but also get good, solid history and facts into their life? And that's really, and I'm not there yet. Like we're still working on that. But that's really where I started seeing channel growth, was when I started paying attention to the analytics, to what my viewers actually wanted to watch, to the framing of my content, the pace of my content, and trying new things, you know. And when you find one that works, stick with it and try to make it a series or whatever. So I'm still learning all the time. So.
All right, that was the first half of the interview. It's a 45-minute interview, so I had to cut it up into 2 different episodes. So episode 3 is just a part 2 to this interview. I really hope you guys enjoyed that. Thank you, Steven, and go check out that next episode. See ya. UV's Music Podcast, yeah.